Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Dam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion on the lifetime of Srila Narada Muni in his previous life as the son of a maid servant, who is emphasizing the power of devotional service and the association of devotees to achieve the perfection of life to Vyasadeva. And to substantiate that point, he quotes his own example in his previous life, how from the son of an insignificant maidservant he became an eternal associate of the Lord. And by following in his footsteps, Mahajano Yenakadasa Pantha, Narada Muni is one of the Mahajans, and understanding what are the qualities that he adopted, what is the process that he undertook, and if he used them as clear signposts in our journey to the perfection of life, then it will be very easy, anjasa, very easy and very safe. So, last time we discussed how for a journey, goal must be very clear. That is the first thing. And the second thing should be, we should be balancing our lives in such a way that we don't fall off the path. As Burijan Prabhu very nicely explained, he said, sometimes we go left, sometimes we go right. Sometimes we go left and sometimes we go right. In this way we will be left, and that is not right. So Narada Muni is beginning the explanation of his own life by saying, Aham puratita bhave abhavam mune dasyastu kasyaschana vedavadinam nirupito balaka eva yoginam shushushane pravrushi nirvivikshatam. O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maid servant engaged in the service of the Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. Narada Muni does not hesitate to speak about his fallen condition. Just so that we can actually take a lesson that any one of us can achieve perfection. This is the reason why he specifically quotes his own example. His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, when after the whole seminar of Burijan Prabhu was over, he spoke for about 20 minutes, and when he came to this particular point, he was saying how without any reluctance, Narada explains how he was fallen, so that to emphasize the point that how anyone can become Krishna consciousness, and through him giving others hope that if I could do it as a son of a maid servant, anyone else can also take up the process. Narada Muni also, in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 15th chapter, when he is explaining to Maharaj Yudhishthira, he explains, I think from verse 69 to 74, he explains his life previous to that of this maid servant, how he became the son of a maid servant. He explains how he was an Upadevata, one of the demigods, Gandharvas, named Upabarhana. And he had beautiful bodily feature. He had wonderful opulence. He had excellent abilities of singing as a Gandharva. And he was so intoxicated by these. He was always surrounded by lusty women, always glorifying him. And in this way, he was so absorbed in enjoying the opulences that he had received. And once he was invited to a Sankirtan Yajna by the Prajapatis, and he went there along with all these girls, and he started singing some glories of some demigods. Prabhupada writes in the purport, so Upabarhana was singing some cinema songs. It was not the glorification of the Lord. It was not the glorification of demigod. It was his own glorification. How nicely he sang. And he was one of the demigods too. So, when the Prajapatis saw this intoxicated condition of Upabarhana, they cursed him to become a Shudra. And Prabhupada explains why they decided to curse him to become son of a Shudra. Because in a cultured society where people are second born, that is Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, free mixing and loose association with the opposite sex is not allowed. But here he was, an Upadevata, and he was acting as a low-class person. And therefore, they cursed him that he would lose all these opulences and he would become a son of a maid servant. This position, there are many points that Burijan Prabhu explained. The first he was explaining was how this situation made him humble and totally dependent, which was actually a blessing. Because when a person is very humble and feels totally dependent, that's a very conducive attitude to develop spiritual consciousness. So therefore, he explained how it is very difficult to tell in this world what is fortune and what is misfortune. Narada explains how it was misfortune that he was cursed, but actually it was good fortune that he was cursed. So, a material blessing turned to curse is actually a blessing. So, material blessing, why? Because the experience of curse is never pleasant to the false ego, which is destroyed in this situation when we are cursed. Well, when a person feels very insignificant and totally dependent on someone. So, but actually, that situation was actually very favorable because he was very humble and he was dependent. When a person is intoxicated, it is very difficult to appreciate good association. But when a person is very humble and feels dependent, then he can take full advantage. In this situation, earlier situation also he had association of great souls, Prajapatis, but he couldn't appreciate that. But when he became the son of a maid servant, totally dependent, very humble, no chance of becoming frivolous because it was a necessity, just to work hard. And such a time when he had the association of Bhaktivedantas, he could actually appreciate. So if those opulences, which life is basically, he was explaining how it is a handful of karma. And it is got somehow or other. But when we think that these opulences are ours, it's our own ability for me to enjoy, then that becomes a curse. Because we will not be able to appreciate mercy when it comes in the form of wonderful, an environment surcharged with devotion and association of exalted devotees of the Lord. So, here he got that, and here he could actually appreciate. Another very nice point he was mentioning, that it was such a humbling position that this boy did not even know who his father was. That's a very unfortunate situation. And this situation brought humility and dependence that was born out of it. Subordinate position is very secure because people in that position feel cared for. So, humility and dependence is a wonderful quality actually, because you feel yourself subordinate and you take shelter of an authority and you feel cared for, and that's a very good situation. In another place, in his book, Unveiling His Lotus Feet, which is a description of the first 4 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, in about 2 paragraphs, very analytically, he explains the nature of Kali Yuga, which is totally opposite to this quality of humility and dependence. The whole propaganda of Kali is to make people proud and make people feel independent of everyone else, rather than dependence or interdependence, feeling pride and independence. And he explains how Kali's mission is to undermine authority. Somehow if he can make people undermine authority, then he can have his own way. He can spread his influence of quarrel and hypocrisy. Krishna is the ultimate authority. And anyone in the authoritative position should be actually representing Krishna. Guru na sasyat, Shudro na sasyat, Pita na sasyat, Janani na sasyat, Daivam na sasyat, na patim na sasyat, namoche tat samupeta mrutyum. Actually Krishna is the father. Pitahamasya jagato mata dhata pitama. Krishna is the father, Krishna is the mother, Krishna is Krishnam Vande Jagat Guru. He is the Guru. He is empowering the demigods. So anyone in the position of taking care of others should always feel that I am only a representative of the Lord. Krishna is the Supreme Father. As a father, I should represent Krishna and see that people who are dependent upon me are protected and maintained. Krishna is the only protector. Krishna is the ultimate maintainer. And anyone who is in a position of leadership in terms of father or mother or guru or husband or whatever should understand that his service is maintenance and protection of people under him. And the duty of those who are subordinate are to be humble and feel dependent and subordinate, be subordinate. And that's a very sweet relationship. And that's very conducive to evoking our natural situation of being a servant of the servant. Because our natural situation is subordination, submissiveness, surrender. So, how does Kali achieve this? That people become egoistic and people become independent. Kali corrupts authorities and reveals them as inept, inefficient, and hypocritical. Kali introduced himself through an inexperienced, immature Brahman boy, Shringi, who, out of pride, cursed the emperor of the whole planet, who was actually protecting influence of Kali from this whole planet. Foolishly, he cursed Parikshit Maharaj, die within 7 days. So, Brahmana is supposed to be the head of the society. But then Kali entered through that. So proving Kali that the authorities are inept, inefficient and hypocritical. In Vedic culture, there was this beautiful, loving relationship of the maintainer and the protector in the form of the person in charge, and people under them are very subordinate and submissive and be feeling dependent. Any relationship, take it as husband and wife, parent and child, priest and the congregation, government leader and citizen. Natural relations that combine authorities with their dependents prove unreliable and untrustworthy in Kali Yuga. So Kali's job is to corrupt the authorities. And the authorities, when they prove to be hypocritical, inefficient and inept, then Kali cries out in the ears of the people who are dependent. He said, see how the authorities exploit their dependents. Let there be independence for every man and woman. Think for yourself. Care for yourself. Who else will care for you? Be your own authority. And the pet theory of Kali is the Darwin's theory of evolution. It was not actually Darwin, it was Kali speaking through him. Somehow empowered. Why Why is this theory a pet theory of Kali? Because if people think they are evolving, they will come to believe that the ancient tradition and authority obstructs progress. Because if you are evolving over a period of time, why stick on to those old ancient traditions, all those ancient beliefs? We are evolving, things are changing, time is not the same. Now we have to progress. And these being submissive to authorities and following all these ancient traditions are simply obstructions, impediments to human progress. And that is a subtle message that the authority of or the propagation of. That's why Srila Prabhupada said one of the favorite pastimes of a preacher should be to defeat this atheistic theory of man from monkeys and this kind of evolution theory, materialistic evolution theory. Children will think of themselves as more evolved than parents, and following elders impedes humanity's onward march. Therefore, they want to become independent of the authority and want to break themselves from the chains of old thoughts, primitive thoughts. It provokes unbearable continuous quarrel and dissension to break apart honored tradition and social structures. Preaches convenience over duty or enjoyment over duty. That's the preaching. You just enjoy life. Why? What's all this duty? Duty towards this, duty towards that. Enjoy life. So convenience over duty. In fact, today in colleges they have this T-shirt which says their philosophy in just 3 words. Just do it. You feel like it, you just do it. Who cares, You feel like it, you just do it. So, rather than being submissive, be your own master. But then, there is a problem. Despite Kali's difficult to deny rationale, he gives a perfect rationale, driving people towards self-oriented independence, people find themselves in problem. Because the nature of the soul is to be subordinate. Chiver Swarup Hoy Krishna Nityadas. But then, when people artificially try to become egoistic, proud and independent, which is not their constitutional position, there arises few problems. Number 1, tremendous anxiety. Because you have to fend for yourself. There is no structure where you always feel protected and cared for. There is no shelter. You have to fend for yourself. And therefore, at the back of the head, there is always anxiety. Secondly, you feel lonely. Because you don't want anyone as an authoritative position to be subordinate to. And therefore, you find loneliness. Because everyone wants to be the Lord and Master. Everyone wants to be independent. So there is no question of kind of staying together under an authority or something. And therefore, everyone feels lonely. Loneliness is a disease of Kali Yuga. And the third thing is, because we are not in our natural position, there is a deep sense of dissatisfaction in the heart. Because the living entity's constitutional position is to serve. So, since that is not there, then there is a sense of general discontent, dissatisfaction in the heart. But Kali has a solution for it. And what is that? Revolution. Break the remaining boundaries. Seek progress through science. Forever forward. But someone may say, no, it's painful. I feel pain, I feel lonely, I feel anxiety, I feel dissatisfaction. There is some dissatisfaction in the heart. So Kali says, dull that pain with intoxication, with movies, with sports, with sex, with music. Enjoy instantaneously, if not virtually, but enjoy. So the whole propaganda, increase your self-esteem. After all, who but you are the ultimately important. But then he explains very nicely, as soon as one turns his back to Krishna and loses his sense of himself as a servant of God, he must develop an alternative false sense of identity. Everyone needs a sense of identity. In spiritual life, you get an identity. Jiver Swarup hoy Krishna Nitya Das. There's an identity. I am Krishna Das. But if you turn away your face from Krishna, you desperately seek an identity. And what is that identity? Prabhupada explains in the 3rd canto, 5th chapter, 31st verse. Very beautiful. He says, the chief function of false ego is godlessness. So you have to develop another identity, a false identity. And that's the false ego. The real ego is to be a servant, but a developer. And Kali's assignment is to make the false ego flourish. And therefore, when Upabarhana was cursed from that opulent position to in a most unfortunate position of where he was forced to become very humble, forced to become very dependent on others and subordinate, actually he was able to appreciate the mercy when it came in his life. Because subordination gives a mood of respect, dependence, protection, humility. And these all qualities are very favorable to becoming a Vaishnava. These are all qualities of a Vaishnava. Therefore, in the Vedic culture, these qualities were already there, and just what was needed was to just add Krishna. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada said, Indians are so close to Krishna, but only thing is they are looking in different direction and running. If they would only simply turn, of course, even in India there's hardly any Vedic culture now. Hardly. But still, there is a sense of responsibility in those who are elder. Like at least in Vedic culture, if a person was born even one day before the other, the person who was born earlier was considered elder, and he was to be respected, and people were subordinate to him. Lord Ram was born few seconds before Lakshman and Shatrughna and others. But Ram was considered the eldest brother. I personally know one family, my very close friend, who are 3 brothers and 3 sisters. The brother was the eldest brother. The father retired a little early because of some problem, disease, he had some problem. So the elder brother immediately took up the responsibility of the father. And it was his responsibility to see that all the 3 sisters and the 3 brothers, and 2 more brothers under him, had to be married. And more than the brothers, he wanted the sisters to be married. And the eldest sister had some little problem, some handicap or something. It was very difficult to get a match, and somehow they found one. Then the second sister was married, and then the third sister, then the second brother. During all this time, the parents were forcing the elder brother, why don't you get married? He said, yeah, somehow. He would see some girls were coming to see him, but he would see. He was very much concerned. He expressed to me once. He said, I don't know what kind of wife I'll get. And if this wife that I get, since I'm the eldest, if she is not supportive and cooperative with my mindset of my responsibilities, what I want to do, it will be havoc. And therefore, first of all, I want to see that everyone is properly settled. And then, but of course, by that time he was quite old. And by the time the last one got married, the last brother got married, Jai Shri Radha Gopinath ki Jai. The mother had some problem and she turned blind, actually, totally blind. The father was incapable, invalid. The mother was blind, and the daughters had gone and settled elsewhere. The sons also, 1 or 2 of them settled elsewhere. So ultimately he was taking care of them too. And ultimately, I don't know, because when I left, he was still not married. And that's about 18 years back, I don't know. But the fact was, his whole life, he took up that responsibility as the eldest son. He felt it was his responsibility to see off everyone under him are properly cared for, protected, and properly settled. And in that process, he sacrificed actually. So, and therefore, all these people under him, they practically saw him as their father. Practically saw the eldest brother as their father. Very respectful and all. So, if already there is a sense of subordination and respect, etc., the only thing you need to add is that subordination to Krishna. That's very easy. But if a total sense of independence is there, to change that whole mindset, paradigm, and then to introduce to the highest authority and see everyone as a representative is a little difficult task. So it was a blessing for Narada that he was in such a position where he was naturally able to appreciate. Then Narada says, when they were he had the association of the Bhakti Vedantas. Although they were impartial by nature, these followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty and I did not speak more than required. Such a position where he was cursed to become very tied up with so many responsibilities, there was no question of frivolity, because it was a desperate necessity to struggle for life in that very humble position. And therefore, he was in a situation where he was forced. There was no question of frivolity, there's no question of sports, etc. So, therefore, he was able to appreciate the association of the Bhaktivedantas in a much better way. So, he was explaining how our serving tendency is perfected when turned to devotees, when it is turned towards the devotees. So he was a servant. He was the son of a maid servant. He had to serve everyone who came to that place because his mother was a maid servant. But that serving tendency, which was inborn because of his unfortunate position, was perfected when through Agyata Sakriti it was directed and pointed towards the Bhaktivedantas. And that was the beginning of devotional service. So, this first, Prabhupada explains the wonder of an atmosphere surcharged with devotional service of the Lord is briefly described herein by Sri Narada Muni. So, two things he says. What was his good fortune? His so-called misfortune, where he was cursed, proved to be a good fortune because he had two things. One is an environment surcharged with devotion and association of exalted Vaishnavas. So this is a good fortune. And he was able to appreciate in this particular situation. Once only by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at the same time, the very nature of the transcendentalists became attractive to me. So, Bhurijan Prabhu was explaining that service gave birth to opportunity. Because he was serving, it gave birth to opportunity. And those opportunities led to mercy. He got the opportunity of serving them. He got some mercy in the form of Uchistalepan. They were very merciful. They were pleased with his service attitude, and therefore they showed their mercy, gave their remnants. Remnants doesn't simply just mean that. When you are pleased with someone, you want to give them the blessings by giving them some confidential knowledge out of. Actually, devotional services, when a person is satisfied, he opens his heart towards the person with whom he is satisfied. And when he opens his heart, bhakti or internal energy flows through that. So real preaching is pleasing the person, pleasing the devotee. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasad. Because when you please someone, they open their heart. And when they open their heart, their devotional energy, which is actually the internal energy of the Lord, simply flows. So, service gave rise to opportunity, which led to more mercy, and that mercy led to purification of the heart. The more mercy you get, the more you get purified in the heart. Prabhu explained, the Bhakti Vedanta's business was to give mercy. And our business is to accept the mercy. But the problem with us, he was explaining, is we try to mind others' business, not our business. The Bhakti Vedanta's mercy is already there. They have already showered their mercy. Our business is to qualify to receive it through our attitude. Prabhupada explains in NOI, Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. Mercy is there practically everywhere, like the sunlight. But we have to qualify to receive that. Narada qualified himself and was able to actually receive. And because of that mercy, there was purification of the heart. And what is the result of purification? As he says, I became purified in heart, and at the same time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. Because the Bhakti Vedantas are representatives of the Lord. Krishna is supremely attractive like a magnet, and we are being his part and parcel like iron filings. But when we are rusted, when the iron filing is rusted, it is not attracted to the magnet. But purified, if it is purified and it comes to its original state, it is naturally attracted to the magnet. So, because Narada, in his previous life, served, got the mercy, and which led to purification, because of that purification, the nature of the Bhakti Vedantas became very attractive. Prabhupada explains in this verse, Shushusho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. Vasudeva Katha Ruchi, taste for the holy name, taste for anything in relationship with Krishna comes Syat Mahat Sevaya. And he explains why by Mahat Seva this attraction arises. Because who are Mahatmas? Mahatmanastu Mam Partha Daivi Prakriti Mashata. They are risking their lives for the service of the Lord. They are risking their lives. Jesus Christ risked his life. Haridas Thakur risked his life. Srila Prabhupada risked his life, facing heart attacks, etc., to preach the message of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord is so much obliged to these great Mahatmas that he becomes subordinate to their will. And when they are satisfied with someone and they pray for someone, mercy has to flow. Like Mahaprabhu told so many times his sincere, pure-hearted devotees. He said, I am completely imprisoned in your heart. You can sell me where you want. Because they are risking their lives, Krishna is so obliged. Whatever they speak, in fact, Lord Brahma says, because I am a soul totally surrendered to Krishna, whatever I speak, it comes true. Whatever Arjuna spoke, Krishna had to fulfill. Satyam vidhatum nijabhritya bhashitam. Lord Nrsimhadev appeared simply to prove the words of his devotee true. Prove the words of Brahma true. Prove the words of Narada true. Narada had given word to Kayadu when she was pregnant. She begged Narada, please see that my child is protected. Narada told Kayadu, I promise you, your child will be protected from all enemies. And when Hiranyakashipu wanted to kill Prahlad, Lord Nrsimhadev had to protect the word of Narada. And Prahlad had told that yes, the Lord is there in the pillar. So he had to prove that true. He had to prove his word true to Arjuna. Kaunteya pratijani name bhakta pranashadi. Krishna fulfills so many things at one time. So, by that mercy, they were merciful to all, and by serving them, the nature of the transcendentalists became very attractive. And Prabhupada writes here, there are many things which hinder one from entering devotional service. By the association of pure devotees, all these obstacles are removed. The neophyte devotee becomes practically enriched with the transcendental qualities of pure devotee, which means attraction for the personality of Godhead's name, fame, qualities, pastimes, etc. Infection of the qualities of the pure devotee means to imbibe the taste of pure devotion always in the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. This transcendental taste at once makes all material things distasteful. Therefore, a pure devotee is not at all attracted to material activities. And because Narada served these Bhaktivedantas and their quality became attractive to him, therefore, he was also gradually getting distasteful of anything material, and he was getting so much attracted to anything connected with Krishna. O Vyasdev, in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantis, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. Prabhupada explains here, the whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. This is the only quality. And what is that? Simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes. Narada Muni has eternal life, unlimited knowledge, and unfathomed bliss, and he can travel all over the material and spiritual world without restriction. One can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources, as Sri Narada heard from the pure devotees, the Bhaktivedantas, in his previous life. This process of hearing in the association of devotees is specially recommended in this age of quarrel. This is the good fortune. The good fortune he got was hearing Krishna Katha in the association of devotees. If someone has this, he must consider himself the greatest good fortune, to hear about the Lord in the association of devotees. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear the Lord was unflinching. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental. Gurujan Prabhu here explained very nicely how he overcame his gross and subtle covering. The Lord has no gross and subtle covering. There is no difference between his body and his soul. And we have a gross body and a subtle body, which is made of matter, gross and subtle matter. The moment we realize we are not the gross and subtle body, we are self-realized. So how do we spiritualize the gross and the subtle? As long as we have a body, we have to accept the fact. The gross body, Prabhupada writes in the purport, is spiritualized by engaging in worship of the deity. When we are engaging in devotional service, our physical body is engaged. And how is our subtle body engaged? The subtle body is engaged by always thinking about how to execute our responsibilities and our devotional service, planning. In this way, both the subtle and the gross body is engaged. The gross body should be engaged in acts of rendering service to the Lord, as in bringing water, cleansing the temple, and making obeisances, etc. The path of Archana or worshipping the Lord in the temple involves engaging one's gross body in the service of the Lord. Similarly, the subtle mind should be engaged in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, thinking about them, chanting His names, etc. All such activities are transcendental. None of the gross and subtle senses should be otherwise be engaged. Prabhupada explains in one purport in the first canto, what is self-realization? How do you judge? When a person, to the extent a person is self-realized, he becomes callous to the needs of the gross and subtle body, and he becomes very serious. He becomes indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle body, and he becomes very serious about the need of the soul. This is one sign that a person is becoming advanced in self-realization. If you know that you are not the gross and subtle body, you are indifferent to its crying needs. Whereas the needs of the soul, he takes it very seriously. And Narada, in this, as a child, 5-year-old boy, realized that the Lord is totally transcendental. Gurujan Prabhu was in this, explaining a very nice thing. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord is described not as God, as the controller, but as the supreme absolute truth. That means He existed beyond the creation. What was the Lord doing before creation? We only see, in terms of most of the religious tradition, see God as a controller wanting to, punish the wrongdoers and reward the people who... It's just like he was telling, he saw a cartoon. There is a man walking on the street, and just next to the street there is a huge multi-storied building, and top of the building God is sitting with a computer, and his enter button, just his finger is just above the enter button, and the computer is attached to a big pole, and on top is a big piano, and there is a rope tied to the piano, and he's waiting for the man to come right under the piano, and as soon as he comes, enter button, it will fall on his head, he shall be punished. So this is the conception of God people have, busily taking note of who did what, whom to punish, whom to reward. Can you imagine? He has no other business, billions of living entities, and he's always thinking whom to punish, how much to punish, and whom to reward, how much to reward. No Sunday, no vacation, no holiday. And still people want to become God. He said, this is not the idea of God in the Vedic culture. The supreme absolute truth is not doing all this. He has Parasashaktir Vividhaiva Shuyate Swabhaviki. He has so many other representatives to handle all these things. He is just enjoying. He was giving an example how one time he went to a beautiful church somewhere in Rome or somewhere, and on the dome there are these beautiful paintings, glass paintings like that, and he saw there's a picture of God, an effulgent personality and light coming out, and the devotee of the Lord is going like this in awe and reverence. God is all great. But he said, in Krishna Lila, you see Mother Yashoda she has a rope and a stick in hand, and she's asking Krishna, how dare you steal butter? And she's about to tie him up, and the supreme absolute truth is going like this, out of fear. Who can understand this? That is the way he expressed, typical of Purijan Prabhu. Who can understand this? So this is the supreme absolute truth, much beyond controller, proprietor, and all these things of this material world. He is just in the spiritual world, having sweet, loving relationships with his devotees. Who can enter Vrindavan? Only whom he loves and whom he trusts. You can't invite someone in your home whom you don't love and whom you don't trust. So the Supreme Lord invites only those who are pure lovers. And love means to sacrifice. They're ready to sacrifice everything. Whom he trusts. He said, unlike in this material world where a big man, rich man has a royal butler, and the butler after the whole thing, he just resigns his job and then he writes a book. All the scandals that happened in the palace. It is not like that. He says only those devotees who are pure lovers, who want to simply please the Lord, totally surrender to the Lord, get entry into these pastimes. So Narada, by their mercy, was able to understand the supreme absolute truth and understand himself as also totally transcendental to the gross and subtle body. Thus, during 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. And then he says, I was very much attached to those sages. I was gentle in behavior and all my sins were eradicated in the service. In my heart I had strong faith in them. I had subjugated the senses and I was strictly following them with body and mind. He said this is balance. He had subdued his mind and he was strictly following with body and mind. We go off balance from achieving our goal because our senses are pulling on one side, the mind is pulling on one side, the ego is pulling on one side, the soul wants to go on one side. When there is pull from different sides, you go off balance. So when you not only having the goal clear, but you have to balance. And balance comes, as Rupa Goswami says, Vishahe tadhiram sarvamapi mam prathivim sashishyat. Only such a person can, who has balanced, he's a Goswami, that means he's not catering to the needs of the senses and the pulls of the mind, etc. Only then can we actually go ahead. And then Narada explains that his devotion increased and it became like a river. It started flowing. And when bhakti gains movement, just like Kunti Maharani plays, Ratim udvahatam adha gangaivo gamudanmati. Please Krishna, let my affection towards you flow like Mother Ganga, which does not stop till it reaches the sea. Unless that our devotion in the heart is not just a small drop or a stream which dries up in the desert. It doesn't flow because if it's just a small stream, it will dry up in the desert. But if it's an unlimited source of water, irrespective of whatever obstacle comes. Recently, 2 years back, we were in Himalayas, Gangotri and Badrinath. And there we saw Mother Ganga flowing there, Alakananda flowing there. Such force of water that irrespective of what came in front, either the Ganga would flow under it or above it or beside it. Even a mountain, it would go from the side and again meet. Nothing could stop. Similarly, when the devotional energy in the heart increases, and because of connection with Krishna, it is unlimited, constantly flowing, then irrespective of tada rajas tamo bhava kamalo bhadayaschaye cheta eter anavidham sitam sattve prasidhati. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogatah bhagavad tattva vijnana mukta sangasi jayate bhidyate hridaya granthis chidyante sarva samshaya. When it flows and unobstructed by the mode of passion and ignorance, then that continuous flow will not stop till it reaches. And we find in the later chapters, Narada began his wandering. And it was good fortune, but the bad fortune was the Bhaktivedantas left at the end of 4 months. So it was a misfortune. But then there was another misfortune. The only person who was dependent on him and he was dependent on her, his mother expired, bit by a serpent. But in that unfortunate situation, because Narada had heard the Bhaktivedantas and knew that not a blade of grass can move without the sanction of the Lord, and anything that happens in our life, good or bad, is ultimately good for a person who is sincere and steadily wants to go on. He saw even within that unfortunate situation a good fortune. Krishna had opened the window to get out of his entanglement and move towards him. So he used that opportunity to go ahead. And Narada's wandering we see. Even his wandering was not a lollipop land. That he was a small boy and wandering. He didn't know. But he was traveling all over the world. And there is no report that somebody saw him as a little child and adopted him and he became the son of a rich father and he lived happily ever after in his estate. Neither was he attached, nor was he interested. He passed through cities and towns and villages and bamboo reeds and sometimes gold mines. Purujan Prabhu said he didn't decide to settle down there and fill his pockets with gold. So he passed through gold mine and silver mines. Then he passed through bamboos and jungles. Because he could see Krishna is everywhere. He was only looking for Krishna, Krishna's mercy and Krishna's shelter. In every situation. And therefore he did not stop till he actually reached. And in this way, of course, many other lessons are there. But we'll end here.